Hello, distinguished friends. I hope that you've had a good lunch and you are now in a peaceful state of mind, capable of perceiving the information that we will be getting from the panel. I'm trying to intrigue you. And before we start, let me announce who the speakers are. Let's welcome them. And as the masters of ceremonies are saying, we need to have warm rounds of applause for them, if you wish. So the speakers of the panel, Ellen Konkevich, a representative of UN Women, Kazakhstan from the United States. Ksenia Sobchak, social and public figure, journalist, TV host, Russia. Evgenia Fineevsky, producer, film director, Oscar 2016 nominee, United States of America. Mary Ann Siger, journalist, writer, chair of the Social Market Foundation think tank, United Kingdom. Santosh Shah, president of today's Youth Asia, anchor and producer for Power Talks from Nepal. And Sophia Hage, co-founder and campaign director of Lentera Sintas Indonesia, board member of the Southeast Asia Leadership Academy Network. So let's start. The team is there. I took part in 9 or maybe 10 Eurasian media fora, and every time I was honored to finalize to the forum, to host the final session. I'm the master of the close-up, so to say. And as we know, it shouldn't be very loaded. We shouldn't say that it should be happy, but it should be pleasant and light, which certainly doesn't rule out the depth of the issue. We're going to talk about morality. It's easy to say, but it's hard to discuss it. In fact, any deliberation on morality might be endless, infinite. And in order to replace any academic introduction, I'll just quote several lines that I've selected as an introducing lines. Given the difficulties of simultaneous interpretation, I will explain that we're talking about two people who have difficulties hearing, and they have decided to choose a referee which is also has problems with hearings. Another deaf invited each other to a judge who was deaf as well. And he said, well, he was actually guilty of eating my cow. And the judge had said, well, this was not his cow, but it was somebody else's cow, as the land didn't belong to you. And the deaf judge said, well, neither of you is guilty. It's some other woman from elsewhere who is guilty. I would say that we have even a more difficult issue to address, whether there is any evolution in morality. All sessions and all panels of the Eurasian Media Forum are united by one single idea, evolution. We have realized that everything is evolving. Even a stone held by an ancient person evolved as a missile with a nuclear head. I would say that there is not so much difference between the two. However, missile is more resultful. The pigeons that were used to send messages have been replaced with modern messaging services. And so, in fact, we can look at many things. In particular, we discussed the European Union countries here. However, all evolutions include involutions, the opposite movement. So, what about the evolution of morality? How can it evolve if it's already there? Some sort of a collection of instructions on personal behavior. So, where can the evolution of morality go to? To immorality or to what? That's the general question that I would propose for all of the speakers. And why don't you speak on this? We'll start in the order. So, where can morality go to? What would be the evolution? Elaine Konkevich, please be the first to talk about this.
Thank you very much. I think that the evolution of morals in the world today is something that needs to be further explored because, I mean, in the area that I'm working of gender equality and the equality of rights between men and women, we cannot say that there should be any difference between men and women and the rights that they have. And that when we talk about morality, we're speaking about what is right and what is wrong, and how can we have different standards for what is right for a man and what is right for a woman. Because I'm going to, of course, I represent the United Nations, and that is founded on the international principles of human rights. And those principles are that we are all born equal, and we have to stay equal after we're born as well. Therefore, in order to have morals and an approach, they have to be equal for both men and women. And it's our responsibility as citizens and members of society in order to maintain that approach for both boys and girls as they grow up. Because if we change this and we hold men and women or girls and boys to different standards, then we're not respecting them as human beings. And who can say that one human being or one sex or the other sex has more value than the other one has? I think this is something that many people blame on culture or tradition, the way girls are raised, the way boys are raised, but for me it goes back to the very basic principle of respect for the human being. And in order to have humanity and respect for humanity, that is a very basic principle that we all have to recognize and live on. And I struggle very much when we speak about this because over time, I mean, we always have conflict, yeah? Think of a time in history. We've never lived without conflict somewhere. And wouldn't it be nice to imagine a world without conflict and how we can create that? And I think that by involving women, not I think, I believe, and I'm a firm believer that if we engage more women in decision-making in all processes around the world, in peace processes, in resolving conflicts, in preventing conflicts, then humanity will only be better off for that. Because if we don't do that, then we will continue to have this disbalance of power and inequality that is the root of all conflicts, whether we speak about domestic violence or brutality in a war. It's all about power relations, and until we equal out these power relations, we won't have peace in the world, or peace in the home even, or peace in society. So for me, this is a question of morals and morality and what it means for us. And therefore, I mean, from my perspective, the involvement of women in gender equality is one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenges of the 21st century. Because until we all understand that and we put our focus and our attention and our awareness on it, we will not move forward as a species, let's say.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Thank you, thank you. Your position is absolutely clear. I'd like to ask Ksenia Anatolyevna Sobchak, would you share a similar position? Gender equality and equal standards is the main attribute for the basic values of humanity to be preserved. Is that true? Well, you see, evidently, I am in favor of gender equality. I believe that this is an important topic, but I would like to go back to your first question. I believe it's very important, in fact, talking about what morality is in terms of the fact that we all believe that this is some sort of a positive and right word. We always keep this kind of feeling inside, and discussion about morality is very pompous, I would say. It's highly elevated, I would say. There are very few people in the world today who might be called moral authorities and who might dare speaking about such a highly positioned topic. I should say right away from the very start that I do not believe to be so highly moral so that I could preach about things. I will tell you about a different thing. I could tell you that the notion of morality was changing instantly. It keeps changing throughout the history of humanity. And we cannot say that morality is something extremely positive to the humankind. Let's go back to the words said by Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorite philosophers. He said that morality is about conditionality, designed to control the liberty of a human being. This is just a generally accepted social norm at a specific period of history in a specific geographic area. Let's not forget that pretty recently in Middle Ages, the morality was to burn women because they were just beautiful, they would attract men's attention, and they would behave somewhat differently, differently from the Middle Ages morality. Let's not forget that it has been not that long ago for the women to get the right to have ownership of things, to vote, and to lead a free life. It's about morality as well. Let's go back to a wonderful film, and those are people who live in the same thing, in the same era with us. This Italian divorce, the intrigue of this wonderful movie with wonderful actors, talking about the problem of this couple. They were not able to divorce. They were not able to get divorced because the morality of that time was that a divorce was not moral. People were not free to live with whoever they wanted to live, to stop loving each other, and to get divorced. And our great writer Tolstoy and his revolutionary novel Anna Karenina. It's a scandalous novel based on that time when it was written, because this topic of adultery and the choice that a woman has, or the right to choose, this topic was immoral. It was not even possible to step forward with a topic for a novel like this. Read the story, the history of this novel, but it was heavily criticized. So, is it really a good thing to see when those morality framework parameters are not moving? I think, on the contrary, it's good that we're somewhat widening that framework when we end up saying that no one needs to be teaching this morality to us the way it used to be in the previous centuries. We are all different, but we're equal, and that's the main morality. People need to lead free lives and choose what it is that they want to do in their personal life and their private life. There are laws, there is the criminal code, finally, there are laws in any religion. There are laws of life in human space, in human coexistence. Don't kill, don't steal, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that are prescribed in the criminal code in every country, and that forms the framework that we're living in. The rest we need to build on our own, in our families, in the communities where we're living in, among the people who are close to us in terms of their interests and in terms of identification. I believe that the rest are the constraints, limitations that were created on purpose to make this or that group of people feel worse than others, not to feel equal. And let's not forget that Even today, women, unfortunately, have no equal rights with men, although those rights are prescribed and enshrined and established everywhere. However, it's not implemented. Have a look at the statistics in our country. The statistics is terrible. Women are paid 30% less than men. Women are appointed to the management positions 6 times less frequently than men, because men feel more comfortable working with men, and that's how they address the situation whenever they need to appoint everything. Look at this Weinstein story and how skeptical many people were about it. For instance, in our country, the Me Too movement, when the rape victims and sexual harassment victims started talking about this openly for the first time. Why do many people are scared about that? Why are they so sarcastic about that? Because this is about the shifts in morality as well. Because any woman is supposed to be in the position of a victim. Even in the modern society, if you were raped, it means that it's your fault. If you were harassed, it means that you shouldn't be wearing a short skirt going to work. That's the morality of today. And what's going on today, this fight for gender equality, for the right to sleep with whoever you want to sleep and to love whoever you want to love, is still in the process. We have not ended that fight yet. And this is the fight against the traditional morality that has always existed. In order to preserve the traditional archaic state of society, this lack of freedom that is imposed on people through the feeling or perception of something that is right and generally accepted. However, if we start to think about it, what is it and is it positive, we can come to a conclusion that this is a conditionality. The conditionalities that were set by some people for other people just to control it and to make sure that the society develops the way that it would be advantageous to a certain number of people staying in power and controlling a geographic location. Well, as a continuation follow-up on your intervention, let me say I will confess that I've recently watching and observing your activity as a next candidate for the Russian presidency, and I should sincerely declare to you personally, this city and the world, that I admired you. You were the best. You presented yourself as the best, although you were surrounded by men, not the most gracious men, but you looked wonderful during this race. I felt some spiritual vibration. My heartbeat accelerated. I was feeling that I was falling in love into Ksenia Anatolyevna Sobchak. So please answer my question. Was that harassment on my part?
Look, even now you're speaking with some irony. No, I'm quite serious. Harassment is not a feeling that we can have towards anyone. A feeling is something that one person can have to another person. But there was no feeling. I just spoke. I spoke out. And you, at least today, a lot of women today see that as an attack, as harassment. Man shouldn't act like that. Is that what evolution of morale taking us to? No, I think you do not exactly understand what harassment is. Harassment is a very precise term. It's not about feelings, it's about actions. The possibility of not giving a woman a job because she refused to go to a restaurant at night because you work with her. That's harassment. That's kind of harassment. I agree with that. The possibility of slapping a woman on her certain parts when she is walking by and telling her, hey dear, bring me some coffee, and while she is your secretary, that's harassment. Now what Weinstein has done, that definitely constitutes harassment. He used his position for his purposes. What MP Slutsky did in my country, that is a proven harassment recorded on tape. And that is a line not to be crossed. You can love anyone. You can have a poster at home, write love letters, speak about that. Thank you, I will do exactly that. I'll give you a poster. Ksenia Anatolyevna, thank you for this response. Now I'd like to continue. You, no, not me, uttered the word Weinstein. You said Weinstein. So I will delegate the question, and otherwise this session, this fail. I'd like to ask Evgeny Afinievsky. Harvey Weinstein, you live in the same country with that man. Do you know, and you know what law is? It's a country with rule of law. Tell me, how is it possible 20 years afterwards, at large, say people, someone raped you or harassed you? How is that? How does that work in like country with rule of law?
Like Ksenia Anatolyevna just mentioned, it's sometimes we live in a certain society where certain situations putting us in a position that we're living with that, and it becomes a norms of our lives. And that's what was a practice of Harvey Weinstein or some other people, and it's a long list that happening right now in the United States of the people who used their positions, higher positions, and they were using these positions to harass or use female actresses or younger female models to get to their dreams, but in exchange to that, they were using their services as sexual services. And I guess I'm really sympathizing to these women that became brave people, and at the end of the day, they decided to stand for their grounds. This is the change that Ksenia Anatolyevna just mentioned. We are living in times that there is a lot of changes happening in our lives. Freedom comes, freedom of speech comes, freedom of expression comes, and these women who decided to come forward and bring the darkness of the elements, how they started their careers. They decided to tell the truth behind 10, 20 years ago, what's happened behind the curtains, behind the hotel rooms. I guess this is the change that our world becoming right now. Now, Harvey actually today started the probe in Los Angeles and New York. That was today breaking news. So it is a good cleansing for our society. Same, I'm jumping out of Hollywood for a second, same like Vatican right now doing a cleansing of pedophilia. And I guess our society needs to go through the process of cleansing to understand what is the norm when the boss can normally, with the respect, treat the secretary. When the boss can look at the person knowing that there is a human rights and equality, that the person that stands in front of him, despite the position are below him, it still have the equal rights. It's important to admit that we are changing the society by these things. Cleansing is the important element that I'm observing. I'm right now doing a movie about Pope Francis, and I'm observing how the church trying really drastically to cleanse this. I'm living in Hollywood, and I'm seeing how many people moving forward, and just in Cannes we just saw this. So it is an important element for our society, I guess. So Harvey is the first element that explode this situation, and I guess we need to put in our brains, we need to educate the new generation of the producers, directors, that women are the same as men. They have also the same equal rights, and harassment, it's something that if we pass in this, it's like a criminal situation. It's like Ksenia just said, that at the end of the day, there is a criminal law. So people need to understand, when you abusing your position, it's like to do something criminal. So they need to put it in their minds, and we need to grow the new generation of the directors. I'm a director in Hollywood. Directors, producers, bosses of the studios, men in general, that they need to understand we're living in a different society right now, that we can't abuse our power. And in the same time, I want to move to the equality in terms of women empowerment. In our days, the most successful bosses of the studios were women. There is so many great samples, from Amy Pascal to many others who've been a successful bosses of the studios. When I came as the kid, as the young filmmaker to Hollywood, I will never forget how the chairman of Paramount was returning my calls, and she was the female. So it is important to embrace these people who heads of the studios, directors. And nowadays, you know what, I'm working with a lot of female directors, and they're great addition to creative world of Hollywood. So I'm moving a little bit and shifting things. Back to the situation with, for example, the Pope Francis. When I was doing a research on him, he empowered a lot of women also on top of the positions that he found important for the church. I was in Argentina. He brought Silvia Tozzi to be a head of the TV channel in Argentina. He appointed a woman to be a head of PR of his division inside of Vatican. So it is important to allow women to be a part of this world. I also want to go back to my last movie that I did with Shahida Tolaganova, who just did a master class. We both try to give to the voices of women in Syria ability to bring their pain to the screen, to talk about the war, revolution, and everything, despite that the mentality of the Middle East, again, norms of the mentality of the Middle East is macho. But despite that, for us it was important to allow women and the mothers and the kids to bring their voices that never been heard to the big screen so people can learn what exactly happening. Yeah.
Thank you. A wonderful answer. Yevgeny, I readily admit that Weinstein did truly commit all those unlawful and immoral actions as alleged. I am already confusing him with Saint Sebastian. You know this character? A great artist would paint him tied or chained to a tree with a multitude of arrows in his chest. And if one was to collect all the arrows that the painters would draw, the number of lawsuits against Weinstein is actually higher. It may be that that's actually what he did. Those probably are the moods of that industry. You probably know that better than me. You live and work there.
It was expression, casting couch, expression that was for ages in Hollywood. Casting couch.
Oh, as they call it here, bed of the producer. Same thing here. But my question was, the morality and law. In morality, all sort of cleansing is possible, and I'm with two hands for that. We need to cleanse from all that bad, but it has to be proven that it did happen. And this is my next question to Mary and Sigurd. What if that Weinstein effect, that it is already Weinstein effect because it spread over the globe. Now, what if in that effect there is malign tonality, malign nuance? What if these are the women who want to use it for some intent and are just lying? If you could please answer that. Is that possible?
Well, of course it's possible, but actually I've been saying to my male friends since the Me Too campaign started, you know, quite a few have said, oh, but you know, I'm sure that there's one man somewhere who's been unfairly accused, and what about him? And I've been saying, yeah, okay, there is a spectrum. Probably 95% of these accusations are accurate. And it would be really nice if my male colleagues and my male friends said to me, hey, we're really sorry, we had no idea what you people, you women, have been going through all your lives, instead of just picking on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, perhaps, of unfair or unjustified accusations. So let's actually talk about the 95%. With Weinstein, there was a huge number of corroborating.
But what do you do with this 5%? You throw them overboard, casualty, just of warfare?
I think what you try to do is to look for corroborating stories, which is what you got with Weinstein. So you had lots of different women independently, and this is the same with court cases. You had lots of different women at different times telling the same story, basically, about what Weinstein had done to them. And therefore, he obviously had a modus operandi. It's very unlikely that all these different women in different parts of the world would have come together in advance and decided to tell the same story. So it's just the same sort of burden of proof as in a court case, and that's exactly what happens generally when you have, say, a serial rapist. You know, although each encounter is just his word against hers, if you've got lots of women to which the same thing has happened, then he's more likely to be convicted. by the way, can I just add to that, I actually know a very heroic woman called Zelda Perkins, who was Harvey Weinstein's PA in London. She was very young, she was only 23. She'd gone to the Cannes Film Festival, and a young actress told her that he had raped her. She went to the police when she got back to England. The police said, we can't do anything about it because it happened in France. So she complained to Miramax, to the company, and he said, I am going to wreck your career, which he subsequently did. She had to leave the movie business. She had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And even though this non-disclosure agreement, she insisted, had the proviso that if he ever got caught doing something like that again, management would take action against him. It never happened. And this has all now come out in public 20 years on. But she witnessed this, and she was very brave. Her career was ruined.
And I want to add, I think like 10 years ago, Sharon Waxman, who is actually right now the chief editor of The Wrap, one of the main outlets for the Hollywood, she tried to break this story. She tried to break it, I think, through the New York Times, and nobody wanted to publish this. At that moment, almost 10 years ago, nobody wanted to publish this because nobody was coming and saying, yes, we were a part of that, and basically the big outlet didn't want to believe in that. And I guess it took so long that we got to this point, to the boiling point, that major amounts of the women were ready to stand for these things, despite being hurt by the publicity. And in Hollywood, actually, bad or good publicity, it's still publicity. So they were ready to bring their hearts and the pain out, and only at that days, right now, we've been able to break this story. 10 years ago, Sharon Waxman, who is right now a chief editor of Wrap, tried to do it, it's not happened. And by the way, going back to the harassment and everything, even these days, Cannes Film Festival had the sexual harassment line that was ringing a lot, and things were happening. Today, we're still living in this situation, and even these days, this line was very active. This Cannes Film Festival that just ended a few days ago.
I want to say another important thing, as I believe. With Weinstein, it's all clear. A large number of witness or victim testimonies, I guess there can be no doubt. But you raised a very good question about this 5%. I, as a person who always stands for the rights of minorities, and I think there should be no injustice. But to this question, there's a very understandable answer. Well, first of all, you must understand that there's official statistics on unfair convictions that are later recalled for murder cases sometimes, or other events when people have been unfairly convicted, sometimes to death penalty, and only after they find out that the person was not guilty. There's a large number of such instances. There's stats on that. But we must understand it happens for any kind of crime. And a second thing, and not least important, not only women go through that path of fighting with traditional morale, fighting for new rules, for their rights, for life conditions, lifestyles. That path, for instance, was walked by Afro-Americans in U.S. And we also remember that there were some instances when some Afro-Americans would claim that they were refused hiring only due to their skin color, but in fact it was that they lacked the merit. It also existed, but as a result, what we have now, because the theme of equality of Afro-Americans was raised, we now had in the U.S. a black president, black people feel free in their own country, and that theme is, you just can't talk about any possibility of any inequality and the likes based on color of skin. We now have a good, healthy society where everybody feels free and calm. Are there problems along the way? Yes, of course. If the problem is that a woman can abuse the situation to take revenge on a man who is innocent, yes, it's possible. But today we're not at that point. We're now at the point when a woman is always a victim, when she's always a temptress. Well, maybe not, she's not being burned in Inquisition fires in the Middle Ages, but she's still being blamed by the society, that it's the woman always to blame. We must break that model. We must show that it's all now different, that a man has to be more careful, man has to watch his words, his hands, and we should teach them, both men and women, to live under different rules of game and a different morale. I absolutely agree with you. I myself don't like the macho kinds. Unfortunately, for centuries of evolution, they were formed like that. That males are aggressive, a beast, if you will, that is crystallized in wars, and it's just a being that prefers to take rather than conquer by his dignity, by his merit. Unfortunately, take by force, but it's all true, unfortunately. And it's clear with Weinstein, it's clear there are a lot of witnesses, and most likely that's how it was. But we don't have yet a court ruling. But in the Middle Ages, there were a lot of witnesses who would point a finger at a woman and say, he came to our courtyard and then our cow died. She is a witch. There were a lot of witnesses, and innocent women were burned alive. How many of them? 5% or 95%? I don't know, but there were such instances. It's just a comment. The question, why those testimonies were made, when it's made out of revenge, out of some upsets. But remember, at the time of Stalin, there were a lot of accusations made just to take the next door room, and people were blamed of being a Japanese spy. A person would get shot, and the person will get a room. But compare it with the situation of women who don't gain anything. It's actually a painful thing for them to tell. They have to open up some unpleasant, intimate details for a good cause, for equality, for the society to learn to live differently, to bring our children up differently, to bring up our sons differently. I, for instance, feel great responsibility. I have a baby son, and I understand that it's my job to bringing out understanding that men and women are equal, that the advertising that we'll have to take on TV, when it's a woman doing the laundry or making food for her husband, let's say it's a commercial for, it's wrong. Should it be the other way around? No. Parents should cook together, and it's not important who is doing the laundry today, who is cooking today. There are no male and female house chores. There's equality in the family, that there's gender equality all around. And the fact that we still get that in commercials, advertising, in social media. These models of how you should behave because of your gender, because of your sex. I think that is also something that we should and must change. And as a great example of that, I'm switching to Russian. I can go back to English if you want.
In the United States right now,
interrupted by a man again.
and one of the recent samples of United States about how this can be used in a really bad way. Our president of Academy of Motion Picture, John Bailey, was accused in sexual harassment. They did investigate this. Respectful cinematographer. And you know what? They proved that it's never happened. So at the end of the day, yes, there is elements that used sometimes in a bad way. So that's one of the great samples. And at the end of the day, you know what? We need to sometimes divide things. We need to learn. Yes, against Harvey Weinstein, you have already so many women, so you can cross things and you can understand this. But sometimes you have singular stories. And like I said, in Hollywood, you have bad PR, good PR, it's still PR. And sometimes people building their portfolios in a bad PR.
I think the use of the word witch hunt as a metaphor is actually a really bad and inaccurate one, because we all know that witches don't exist, but we know that sexually harassing men are frankly everywhere, abusing their power. So it's actually very different. And you talked about, oh, well, men can't help being aggressive. Well, you know, in a civilized society, we expect men to control their impulses. And we don't expect you to go around and to rape and to pillage and to kill people. There are laws against these things. You know, you men, I'm afraid, just have to control your hands. It's not that hard.
Прошу.
Please. Sophia.
Weinstein, it came out as very good, but I think the most significant thing is that then men understand that this is no longer acceptable, even 20, 30 years afterwards. You spoke about how this was the norm then, yeah, in the 50s, the 60s, this behavior was unacceptable. It doesn't make it right, though. We change our understanding, we evolve our understanding at that point, but the reason why it was acceptable then, and it's still acceptable in many places, again, to this inequality of power relations. That's the only reason why it can happen. And for me, the most significant thing is for men to understand, and women who do such things, because it does happen, but that be careful what you do. I mean, it can be 20, 30, 40 years later, you are held to a code of behavior and ethics and respect for the rest of your life, and that, you know, you cannot, now you cannot avoid that or evade that anymore. And I think this is the most powerful, for me, lesson out of this, that now we become to hold people to account that for so long we're not held to account with their actions.
And right now, almost every guild, every organization.
That's so good.
Евгений, послушаем Софию.
Evgeny, let's listen to Sophia. I'm happy that you're so eager to talk, but let's let her talk.
So one thing that I think needs to be cleared out is because some men would start to question, oh, is this sexual harassment or not? And I know even when we were discussing before the talk, you were questioning when is it sexual harassment or not. I like what Ksenia was mentioning about action, but it's really not only action, but it's consent. And if it's not yes, then it's not yes. If it's a silence, then it's a no. If it's a maybe, then it's a no. If it's not yes in any way, then it's a no. And so sometimes this is overlooked because of the power imbalance, because the abuse of power, whether it's in work relationships, whether it's in personal relationships. And even we struggle with, I don't like to put morality in the context of gender violence, because really, morality has to evolve. What we need to talk about is empathy and compassion. Because if we talk about morality, then what is the limit to then somebody would start questioning the morality of the victim? Because this is what we see now, how the victim blaming paradigm is still around and is still practiced in Asia or globally even. How if a victim comes out and speak out about an incident 20 years ago, she's still questioned whether or not she wants it, or whether or not she enjoyed it, or whether or not she got an award for it, or whether or not she got published, or whether or not she has an extra income out of it. And this paradigm has to change, because when we talk about morality, it's not about whether the specific action is moral or not. It's not about the sexual history of the perpetrator or the sexual history of the victim of gender violence. So we have to talk about empathy and compassion, especially in the system of where we live in a situation where victim blaming is still high.
Спасибо.
Anyway, at this point in our discussion, I understand that the witch hunt was imagined because witches never existed. However, machos are still there, but I would say they're almost getting to the end of their existence. But we have not yet heard from Santosh Shah a story similar to Harvey Weinstein. Would it be possible to see something like this in your country?
I'll go slightly back and cover on all the speakers. If we look at 2 centuries, there were certain diseases that affected the whole world, like tuberculosis or cholera. And the world, or let's say nowadays United Nations or European Union, put a lot of effort and money to eradicate those diseases. And now they are. And there are new diseases like AIDS or cancer that the world investments are going on, and they will find some medicine in due course. Whatever we are discussing today, treating women unequal, raping them, misusing them, treating them as slaves, this is by far the biggest disease the whole world is engulfed with. And no one, no government, no political party, not the United Nations, not the European Union, not a single political party has put a single penny into doing any research or any exploration in trying to find the solution to this. It's a disease that a 5-year-old kid anywhere in Nepal or United States or in Los Angeles or UK suffers from. And no country in the world, no society, no religion is devoid of it. Whereas when we talk about the concept of morality and values, this is one of the least explored subject. It's a very vague subject. And how do we raise a child in a family? It's the society that tells them, the society that's based on a power structure. It's the government that sets up rules that you can't do this, you can't do that, which is also set on the basis of power and money and positions. It's created by the religion, which is also based on power. And surprisingly, who holds how many, what is the percentage of the population that holds it? Less than 1%. 99% subjects to this one minority, and that's because they're diseased. We have United Nations now, we have European Union, we have all kinds of unions in the world. If they don't take this disease seriously, invest into exploring it, and makes the common people discuss and think about it like we're doing right now, I don't see a solution. Just putting one Harvey Weinstein behind the jail, which we're still not sure whether he's going to get behind or not, the most powerful person of the most powerful country is blamed every day, every week. We don't know how many other heads of the states are in the same state, which is not public yet, and will never be public in our lifetime. So we have to go to the core of the problem, which is let's accept it as a mental disease and not a cultural practice or a power practice. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you. A preliminary conclusion: morality and law are always connected, and the rights. The preachings of any priest from any rostrum cannot reason people. If there were instructions, as for instance, Ksenia mentioned, there were some Moses laws, tooth for tooth, eye for eye, and so on and so forth. But then it evolved when, for instance, they started saying if someone hits you on one cheek, then you should turn your other cheek towards that person. The morality keeps evolving, but it's the visible part of the moon. We see it in the sky. Even when the moon is full, you can see it even without a telescope, with all the craters and the lakes, but there is the dark side of the moon as well, the back side of the moon. And those things that are somewhat dormant in the personality, different types of sinful things, and it's the dark side of the moon, and no one ever goes there. Vladimir Nabokov, a Russian-American writer, might go there and catch Lolita there and turn it into a story for the whole world. And finally, Sigmund Freud got in there with a little torch, the unconscious, and he lighted up those landscapes, and they turned out to be terrible. Now they're visible, but they're still distorted. My next question to all of the panel participants: would it be possible to make such public confessions about your intimate behavior? For instance, prior to having those same-sex marriages, isn't it some private matter of every single person? Why should we make it public, and why should we circulate such behavior? Who wants to take up that topic, please? Well, you see, it appears to me that we're shifting somehow the accents again, and I would say that it's important to say this. You see, Harvey Milk became so much known not because he's gay and he came out, but because of his coming out and his political activity. He showed to other people that it's possible, that we shouldn't be ashamed of it, and it's normal. It's not something to be ashamed of if you are born that way. then you shouldn't be living with that feeling of guilt and this unconscious feeling. You talked about Freud, because people living in the traditional societies where it's completely banned and totally unacceptable. If you are caught doing this, you will either be killed or imprisoned. You will never be able to do anything about your career or your future. People understanding that, realizing that non-traditionally oriented people try to suppress that within themselves, and that results in terrible consequences. Their lives get broken. Sometimes they commit awful crimes, and they try to express themselves subconsciously because they're suppressing their natural selves. And this has been scientifically proven. Even among animals, 30% of animals in the animal world are born that way, with the same type of sexual behavior. In that regard, I think this would be a heroic act on the part of those people today, especially in those traditional archaic societies, is that they're saying, don't be afraid about a coming out. This is not propaganda. Do it the way I'm doing it. Just like with rape victims, it's an example. Don't be afraid to say who you are. Don't be afraid to be condemned. Don't be afraid to say I'm gay, but I'm just as human as you are. It's an example of courageousness in the society where that doesn't accept such people, insults such people, makes them ridiculous, and so on and so forth. It's very important not to confuse those two things, those two nuances. This fight is only starting in the world today, and sometimes it might get aggressive, such as gay parades and so on and so forth, because those people want to feel united. They want to feel in the themselves, they want to have the circle of the like-minded people. They don't want to be condemned by the society. It's important to understand that as well, that we're all different, but we're all equal in our rights. And if there are some films featuring love between a man and a woman, then why can't there be movies about love about a man and man? That's another type of relationships, and that should be explained, and it shouldn't be condemned. And then certainly, I believe that the society will treat it somewhat differently. I believe that those are complementary things. Those people are discriminated in terms of their rights. They cannot make their careers in many countries of the world. They cannot get married. This right of marriage, I explained it during my campaign. It's not just as many perceive it. When you put a bridal dress on a man, it's not about that. It's about two people living together all their life. For instance, the story of Gianni Versace and the person who lived with him throughout those 20 years. If the person dies, if something happens, there are no inheritance rights. Everything went to his family, mother, sister. The person who lived with him for 20 years, all his life, who was your main partner, is not entitled to any property. He cannot visit you in a hospital when you're in emergency unit. He cannot come to prison to visit you. Is that fair? Why are we depriving those people of this opportunity to love each other and to be dear to each other, close to each other? I think that being a modern society, we need to provide that possibility. People need to have those property rights. They need to be able to visit each other at the hospital before death if they love each other. I think that it's anti-humane when we turn it into a carnival. I would, in fact, totally agree with you. My question was whether we need to be so aggressive in terms of making it public. But you have explained those people are trying to stand up after being kneeled for a long time, and therefore those gay parades are somewhat gloomy sometimes. I've seen it once in Berlin, and I would never be willing to watch it again. Marie, you wanted to add something. Please go ahead.
A huge evolution in attitudes towards homosexuality and gays and lesbians in the UK, and actually you've seen it across most of the Western world too. So perhaps 30 years ago, about 2/3 of British people thought that homosexuality was immoral. Now it's a tiny, tiny minority. And in fact, it was a Conservative government that brought in same-sex marriage into the UK. And it has been this huge source of joy. It's extraordinary. People now go to gay weddings of their friends, of their relatives, And there is just a huge sense of joy and celebration that two people who love each other want to commit themselves to each other. And it has been a really painless transformation. I mean, it's been wonderful for the gay people, but even for the straight community, it has been a surprisingly painless transformation to a society of tolerance from one of intolerance. And as Ksenia said, all the science shows that people are just born that way. You're either born heterosexual or born gay or possibly bisexual, something in between. And therefore, how can you hold it against somebody? You know, it's just like if you're born with a black skin rather than a white skin. I think that homophobia is as invidious as racism. And if you go back to the religious sort of antecedents of this, briefly, okay. In Christianity, Leviticus says that a man shouldn't lie with another man, and that's what conservative Christians always say, that, you know, homosexuality is banned in the Bible. So is eating shellfish in Leviticus. So is wearing garments of mixed fabrics. So if I were to wear a poly cotton jacket, that would be just as sinful as being gay, and nobody ever cares about that sort of thing anymore. So.
Yeah.
София, пожалуйста.
Thank you so much.
Please, Sophia.
I'm speaking on a place of grief because right now where the world is moving forward, unfortunately my country, Indonesia, is actually at the brink of, at the threat of actually making homosexuality illegal. And so, illegal. So answering your question, why do we need to still talk about it? Why do we need to have campaigns about it? Because we do still have society and countries where loving someone outside of heterosexual relationship is wrong. It's considered wrong. It's considered immoral. We still have societies where they don't see the diverse sexual orientation and gender identity. We still live in a world where if you hug someone, then you're considered gay. In the same sex, you're considered gay. And so right now, in the last 3 years, even in Indonesia, we see a rise in persecution for same-sex relationships. And there are raids that are happening right now. And so I speak this from a place where I know that grief and anger is still there. Because we live in a world where there's so much spectrum, and we need to keep talking about empathy and compassion, that love is love. And whether you love somebody in same sex or different sex, it's no matter. It's love is love. And that's why we need to talk about it and we need to campaign about it.
Спасибо.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Santosh Shah. In your country, are there some brutal, serious limitations and restrictions, constraints for some non-traditional relationships? What is the level of tolerance in your country?
So in Nepal is a country where a lot of gay partners from around the world comes to get married. And in our citizenship, you could choose to be male, female, or others. So we passed that law during last 5 years.
Хорошо.
I want to what Santosh was saying and also make some linkages, because UN Women, we work a lot with domestic violence, and this issue that you raised about disease is exactly the way I explain when we're working on this issue. For example, that you know, we cure cancer, we cure other diseases, and why do we just accept that violence against women is acceptable? And why are we not looking at it as a disease? It's maybe not a medical disease, but it's a social disease that needs not only a cure, and everyone to invest in the cure and the treatment and the helping of the victims, the patients, let's say, but it also needs the prevention. And this is where the coming out in the media, the awareness, these big cases, talking about it, when we talk about homosexuality, the same thing. It needs to be out in the open. People need to start to understand, to digest, to remove the fear of things. I remember also, I mean, growing up in the US where, you know, when AIDS became a big crisis coming out and everyone was afraid, anyone with AIDS, and this is a horrible disease. But then people talked about it and they understood, you know, what it was about, that it's a disease. It's not only a disease of gay people, you know, and how it can be transmitted, and then by kissing someone who's gay, you're not, you know, who has AIDS, you're not going to get AIDS. This is all the part of the transformation of our understanding, and I think we're at the stage now with homosexuality that we were with other okay, disease is homosexuality is not a disease. I'm not trying to imply that, but I mean other social phenomenon, if I can call it that, other ways of life and other things that affect our daily life that we were with some things 20 or 30 years ago. And I think this approach, what was mentioned, is that, yeah, I mean, it's a fear, yeah, until we understand it, till we see how it evolves, what it means for our lives, that it's not a threat to our lives, and therefore we don't need to be afraid of it, then we accept it, yeah, once we understand the ramifications. And so this raising of these cases in the media to say that a woman can stand up 20, 30 years later, I can stand up for my rights, I can have any job that I want, I can marry who I want, is that discussion that we need to be having, because we need to go back that everyone is equal and we all have the same rights, as was said by different panel members, and nothing can change that. Your color of your skin, your religion, your orientation, your gender, your sex, anything. And that's the understanding that we really need to work toward and really get out very, very publicly and have discussion. And raising, yes, also I have 2 boys as well. I mean, raising of the children is very, very key. It's on the one side what is done in the household and the role models of both the parents, whether they be both the same sex or be of different sex, but also in the education system and the norms that we're presenting to the children as they're growing up. And I think we have a huge amount of work still to be done here in every country around the world. And as we're here, Eurasia Media Forum, I want to bring in the media into this, because I think that's another area with so much, everything electronic, social media, everything. This is a massive sphere where we need more attention to these issues. We need more voices being heard, more speaking out, so that, again, people understand these issues and they don't fear them, that they're not afraid of them.
Evgeny, one more comment from me, and then we'll talk to the experts and the audience.
But I just want to say something. Equality is the
Хорошо бы коротко.
Okay, say it well, but briefly.
Equality is an interesting thing, that we're talking about equality of women and men, and here we're talking equality between people. Yeah. In 2008, I did a movie, family comedy. Despite I'm doing a series of documentaries these days, I did a family comedy called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay. That was actually on the Moscow International Film Festival, and it's opened there in 2010, I think. And you know what? The main subject of this movie was the message: love is love, unconditional love in a family. Despite whom your son is dating, the girl or the boy, the African American or the Asian, guy with the HIV or with the cancer, which religion he practicing, it's unconditional love in a family. And actually, the movie was centered not about, center of the movie was not about gay guys, the center of the movie was about parents who were experimenting this situation that their kids found out that they're gays. So I try to explore this kind of thing. This is about love is love that you mentioned there. Now, another thing that I want to say, actually, in our place in the United States these days, diversity is really on a high level, that these days sometimes being the minority, we can say gay, lesbian, or transgender, or African American, or Asian, is more embraced in different organizations. So we're trying to balance this situation and teach the society to look at the minorities on the same equal situation as the majority of the people. So we're trying to teach this. And again, it all comes from the educational standpoint. So we need to start to bring it into the education. And there is already in the United States, at some schools, they're trying to educate younger generation about equality, about sexual education. They try to build this new generation that will equally, without fear, look at these things. Now, about gay parades, I have my personal thing. I live in Los Angeles, where we do have a huge amount of gays. I personally not seeing a great thing in gay parades, because you know what? The straight people, they're not coming to the street and saying, hey, let's celebrate, we are straight people, we are heterosexuals. But at the same time, like you said, it's the aggressive way to show, please accept us, because we want this way. So the more acceptance will come, the more we will not see this so obvious in front of our eyes. Because the people will be living their lives simply, not expressing themselves so obvious. Hey, let's kiss on the street so everybody will see we are gays. No, it will disappear because it will become a norm of the life. The equality will be embraced and it will be part of the society. How about short?
The time has come to talk to the experts, as the timetable requires, and I'll ask our expert, named Sayasat, first, and then everybody else. Not here. Oh, the expert is absent. Then, Maxim Shevchenko, please go ahead. Dear friends, what I was amazed by in this panel discussion is, well, there was one only liberal position of the Western civilization. In these holidays of the holy months of Ramadan, we're now in a country with a majority of population of followers of Islam, just as over a billion other people of the planet. Of course, the followers of Islam, and there are followers of liberal values. There are people of all kinds. There are cruel people, there are kind people, there are tolerant people, there are mean people. But does that mean that morals and ethics of Western liberalism is right, and moral and ethics of over a billion of people of Earth are not right? Who's the question? It's not a question, it's a statement. What about the question? Well, let me finish and then there will be a question. Do you then mean that ethics or morals, the new morals of Western liberalism, is the instrument of expansion and instrument of conquering the world, in the same way as possibly the instrument of achieving and obtaining individual human freedoms? Does that mean that the categories of morale and ethics of the West are more proper than those of the rest of humanity? I mentioned Muslims, I can also mention Catholics. I know United States of America has a lot of Baptists, Protestants who stick to their moral principles. Mormons in India or in Nepal, people who live following religious principles. And from religious principles and morals, well, the majority of people still lives according to those. Orthodox Christians, does it mean that the most of people are so archaic and wrong, and you who have gathered here are so progressive and good? Okay, that was a bombshell. Now who's gonna answer? Please, please.
Прошу.
Please, Sanders. He was first.
Very quick, and then I'll hand over to Santosh. Almost every religion in the world has some version of the golden rule, which basically means treat other people the way you would like to be treated. In Christianity, it is do unto others as you would have done to yourself. But almost every single religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, has exactly that sort of rule. And if that is the basis of your morality, then surely you should treat gay people the way you would want to be treated. You should treat, if you're a man, you should treat women the way you would want to be treated. There is also a philosopher called John Rawls who came up with a very good idea about how we should invent our morality, how we should construct our morality. And he said we should imagine we're behind a veil of ignorance. In other words, we don't know what sort of person we would be in that society. So we don't know whether we would be black or white, male or female, straight or gay. And then we work out what sort of society we would like, not knowing whether we're going to be in the majority or the minority. And the sort of society we would design would be one in which everybody is treated equally, regardless of the color of their skin, their gender, or their sexual orientation.
Thank you.
Santosh was first. Sorry. Please, Santosh.
During the last 20 years, I have trained 3,000 students and mentored them, and out of them, 2,000 are girls. In a society where girls are not a priority. So morality and ethics is something, and moral values is something that I have closely worked with. what I've realized, I mean, I worked with students with different religious backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. I found one common factor, and that every individual has their own inbuilt sensor, their own inbuilt guide or judge that guides them. For example, if you're alone in your bathroom in front of your mirror, there's no religion, there's no society, there's no family. What guides you to think one way or other? And that's something one has to figure out. That is always inherently active in every individual. And to answer your question, sir, I'll answer your question with another question, is did human come first on the earth or did religion come first? And where does morality fit in that timeline?
Я бы тоже хотела...
I would also like to say a couple of words because I think it's very important for this to be heard. I'd like to answer your question, and very clearly, Maxim. Of course, you can't force people to be free. Of course, if women if they like to do house chores and only dedicate her life to childbirth, it's also her choice. It shouldn't be judged. Of course, if a woman, as in Islam, likes to be one of the 4 wives, that's also her choice. You can't force people to be happy. You can't force people to be free. But what I dislike about this concept, in patriarchal societies, in conservative societies, we don't see a choice, we don't see an informed choice of the people who could make it. And somehow, and I don't understand why, it's there where there is sticking with these traditional conventions, different religious or moral concepts. That's where there is ban on knowledge of different life, on knowledge of freedom, and that's the only way how those societies live in this modern world. Let's just think, how many people would stay in this closed-up Islamic state as, for instance, Iran or other similar countries, if women had the right to education, if women had the right to know that she can be the only loved wife, where she can live differently, use her freedoms differently, and so on. How many would stay in North Korea if they knew how you can live in South Korea? It's all the matter of bans, endless bans for, first of all, knowledge. I believe person gets to choose on their own. And liberal society, the West, Europe, should not dictate anyone. But why not let people have an honest choice? Show this life and that. Let people choose. We remember how we lived in the Soviet Union and the time when we were simply banned from living the country to see how people live in the West. And of course, everybody wanted to live that life, wanted to buy the people, wear the clothes, listen to the music, and in the end, those bans fell. I'm not saying that liberal values have to dominate the world. I stand for freedom of choice for every individual. But when I see that a large number of people is being deprived of that freedom of choice, who don't choose that just because it's their right, but they have to choose certain kind of life just because they were born certain place. Well, you were born geographically someplace, and that geographic position defines their fate. Can they study the frontiers of their sexual orientation, or is that a criminal offense? Can they be an independent woman on her own? They don't know a different life, and our task is to educate people, educate them and show them that life could be different.
I live in Indonesia, whereas the majority population is Muslim. And answering the question whether religion is less than liberal, no. I grew up, I was born in the 1980s, and I grew up where I see, even if I was born and raised in a majority of Muslim country, it doesn't affect your compassion and empathy. The problem then arises if religion is used to a certain agenda, politicized. used to gain power, used without empathy, and used without common sense and compassion. So no, it's not about whether liberal paradigm or liberal concept is better, or West is better than Eastern concepts, no. I think the problem is where we put aside empathy and compassion, being a human being, and trying to achieve a certain agenda, whether it's politics or economy. Then you would use certain sensitive, divisive method as race, gender, gender orientation, sexual identities, to reach a certain agenda. So no, it's not whether one is better than the other. It's whether we are still functioning as human beings with empathy and compassion, rather than using a social construct to reach a certain agenda.
Thank you, Maxim. I don't know whether the answer is acceptable for you or not, but it's over. Please, good day. My name is Raushan Sarsimbaeva. I lead an NGO, Association of Businesswomen of Kazakhstan. Ksenia Anatolyevna, the question is to you. It is no secret that the age has come of soft power, and your participation in the presidential campaign, I believe, is yet another breakthrough project for women in the post-Soviet era. There are many aspects. It's bravery, it's the willingness, maybe the drive to lead by example. Please tell me, your participation in this presidential campaign, would it become a starting point for other women, or will it just stay as a project? What's your expectation? Will there be 1,000 more opportunities for thousands more women? Maybe not presidential elections, but maybe for governor's position, for seat in the parliament, or other political offices. After your participation in this presidential campaign, would it make women more free, more brave, or nothing will happen? Thank you. Thank you for the question, but you see, I believe that the very fact that I speak about it, I spoke of that, and that I advocate liberal values myself, and I try for more people to know about the injustice that is happening in our country and generally in the world, that already is a very important result. And of course, that is just the beginning. I will continue my political work. Most importantly, I believe and absolutely agree with the statement that if you want to change the world, start with yourself. So I always start with myself, and it would seem to me that today over 6 million people are following me in social media. I have some media resources, and my life is of interest to people, and I hope that seeing that life, the way I interact with my husband, how I live with my husband, how I work, how I try to balance my work and my family, and I manage to stay independent person with my own opinion, and how I do not give in to aggression and intimidation, as you could see that in the election campaign. It was actually a shock for me in our country when we did focus groups. We surveyed different people, gender, age, and everything. A horrible discovery for me was that most men, in principle, believe that in my country, still, that the woman's place is home, in the kitchen, and they clearly state that when it's not a political show where they don't talk about. No, it's a focus group when people are just given a questionnaire, and that should change. And we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about that, because that's how things are in our country these days. And only with personal example, and I see in your country a large number of women who do things. Or organizers of this forum. In that sense, I'm very grateful, and I'm happy to see women who organize these kinds of events only by personal example. And then young girls will think not of satisfying demographic policy of the country only, but think that there are multitudes of other ways, that there are careers out there, that they should be independent of public opinion, that would consider it unwomanly, ungirly, only by personal example, only by educating new generation, only by being what you are, you can teach others. Thank you, Xenia Antonina. We have time for one question and a short answer. Please, as I promised, please pass on the microphone. Thank you. Konstantin Kosachev, Russian Parliament. You know, I find this discussion extremely interesting, but at the same time, I will acknowledge that I'm very much disappointed. If an extraterrestrial was to fly in here and was to read the title of the session, where do we find our new values? That extraterrestrial will think that these are all people victims of sexual aggression and sexual minorities. I disagree with that. There are lots of very important themes that should be discussed, starting from abortion to euthanasia, and in between firearms in the society, narcotics, prostitution. All these things cover the space of individuals, and these are no less important than what you discussed now. No, well started. What do you think about abortion? I'm ready to answer. Please, I'll be quite interested. I am, of course, for abortion. But now, as a politician, let me ask you a somewhat political question, but in the genre of the discussion that just took place in front of our eyes. Many of you, maybe most, have seen how a week ago President Putin, when he met Federal Chancellor Angela Merkel, gave her a bouquet of flowers. And perhaps everybody saw that reaction of at least part of the German society was negative. Magazine Bild wrote that's humiliation next to harassment, and accused the Russian president. So my question to everyone present here in the panel, would you agree with that assessment? And my question to especially women here, are you ready with your values, ready to accept a bouquet of flowers from a man who you don't know and you're not in a relationship with that man? And to the men, are you ready with your values, present a bouquet of flowers to a woman whom you're not in a relationship with, especially if the man is Putin and the woman is German Chancellor? I don't know. I should ask. I should ask for permission to extend the discussion because our time is up. With the statement that abortion should be legalized. Now, who do I ask for permission to continue? Is there an authority? Okay, we may. Great, we continue.
So we had a question about the bouquet of flowers.
Yeah, feel free to give me flowers. I love flowers. Don't have any problem with that. And it seems to me a much more polite thing than, I think, didn't he bring a dog to a meeting with Angela Merkel, knowing that she was phobic about dogs? I'm sure she'd rather have flowers than dogs. And personally, I'm in favour of abortion as long as it's not very late in the pregnancy, because the idea of being forced to bear a child that you don't want, that may be a result of rape, or which may have fetal abnormalities, the idea of having to bear that for 9 months and then give birth is a horrendous prospect.
First of all, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin and Angela Merkel, they're working together in the same field. So it's not like they don't know each other. This is one. Secondly, you can't control media because sometimes media are working against us. And we can't specifically understand sometimes moves that media are doing. Now, I do admire, give flowers to the women. I don't see it as a harassment if you not continue this in any aggressive or harassing way. It's admiration that you admiring person. Now, they co-workers. They're not just two strangers. They're working for a long time together. No, I accepting that this is not harassment. I can say that it is not harassment. It is good. It is good.
Это хорошо. Santosh, вы готовы подарить?
Santosh, are you ready to present a bouquet of flowers the person who, to a woman you don't know, if she is named Angela Merkel? Are you ready to give her flowers?
Absolutely. Now, here's the thing, with training 2,000 girls and having to deal with their security all the time, and their mental well-being, and they're feeling empowered. This is the conclusion I have got out of most of them is, It's not how you present yourself and what you present, it's how the girl takes it. Even if there could be a man at another table in a restaurant, and the girl could feel very uncomfortable, just the way he's looking at her. And even if it could be a male friend of the same age, and he could give her a hug, and she would feel protected. It's all on the perspective of the girl. It's not on the perspective on the other side. How the media sees it, how the world sees it.
София, прошу вас.
Sophia, please, an answer to that question.
Yes, first I am for abortion, especially when we handle victims of sexual violence. The least that we want is for her to raise the kid that she doesn't want. And second of all, please give me flowers. I would love to. No roses, I would prefer tulips.
Ну, пусть по порядку.
Okay, Ksenia Anatolievna, tell us about the flowers. Well, you see, I was very glad when Vladimir Vladimirovich gave flowers to Merkel. I think that we have very complex relations, to put it mildly, with Europe. Even his attempt to show, by doing so, that he would like to improve these relationships somehow instills optimism in me. It was a political sign, so to say, positive. Yeah, I think that when one person gives something to another person, it doesn't matter whether it's a box of chocolates or flowers. It means that he wants to please this person. It's a good sign that tomorrow he's not going to launch a nuclear missile tomorrow, and I'm happy about that. And the second thing, I think, well, I wouldn't again split it up into genders. If people want to please each other, give flowers, a box of chocolates, I don't know, some nice cake, or do a little sign of attention, which is not obscenely expensive, I think it's wonderful. And women can do it towards women, men to men, so on and so forth. Maybe not a bouquet of flowers, but chocolates, for instance. Why not? Ellen, please.
Liberal than the rest of you, but I don't see it as a good sign, because I think that you have two equals, yeah, in a professional relationship, yeah, and him giving her flowers is sending the wrong message, yeah. It's not the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the wife, someone you're dating. I'm sorry, that is a sign of affection to give someone flowers or chocolates. If he wants to give her a present to respect her position and her ability as a stateswoman, it should be a relevant present that's showing that respect and not flowers. And this is, I mean, in the political sphere, I know how it works, yeah? The protocol meets the protocol and they agree in advance, yeah? And there should be an equal then exchange, potentially, of the gifts of something that are relevant. And if he's giving from one side, that puts her, I'm sorry, as a woman, in an awkward position. When men give me flowers, I also feel the same way. It's a way to influence you, intimidate you, say something, build a power relation. I mean, this is my perception, of course. So I don't think that is an appropriate handling of a situation between, I mean, a respect for her. Would he give a man flowers, a statesman? No. So therefore, I mean, we have to take the same criteria every time. What should be an appropriate gift to give Angela Merkel to respect her authority of her position in their professional relationship? If it's done outside of something, I don't know, in a private party, her birthday party, maybe then yes, the flowers are acceptable. But
sorry, but will it intimidate you if a woman, your colleague woman, will give you flowers? Will you feel like kind of bad?
I also don't like to receive, maybe I'm weird that way, I need to receive flowers. It's all the intent, yeah, the message, what it wants to convey. So if
someone could be allergic to pollen or something.
Fine, but not professionally. I don't want flowers even professionally. My colleagues to give them to me.
Distinguished friends, I'm forced to end the discussion, although I'm doing it with regrets. The discussion is over. I'm sorry. We've overrun all of the time limits that we could have overrun. I should tell you that I started with the lines from Pushkin and I stopped with Tuchup. There is a big formula of love that defies all the difficulties, dramatic and tragical. You just need to love life, love the world. And as the Latins used to say, amor vincit everything, love conquers everything. So let me thank the panelists for all the presents that they've given to you. Thank you.